Hello, everyone, and welcome to YPO Presents Ask the Experts. And happy International Women's Day to everyone joining from around the globe. I'm Leah Solivan. I'm the founder of TaskRabbit, and I'm managing director at Fuel Capital here in San Francisco. Today, I am thrilled to be celebrating International Women's Day with two amazing YPO members and business leaders. Adesuwa, Okunbo, Rhodes, and Liza, Rodewald. Welcome. We're going to be discussing equity and funding for women entrepreneurs. Welcome to both of you.
Thank you. So happy to be here today.
Thank you for having me.
So, Adesuwa, I know you're the founding partner and CEO at Adesuwa Capital Management in Lagos, one of the few women-owned and led growth, equity, impact, and gender lens funds in Africa. But would you mind sharing a little bit more about your background and experience with our audience?
Yeah, sure. Thank you again for having me, YPO, and happy International Women's Day. So, my background, I was born in Lagos, moved to the UK for boarding school, and did the first part of my investment banking career in London. I have an investment banking and private equity background. Been doing that now for the last 15 years. And in London, I work for organizations such as JP Morgan in M&A and leverage finance. Worked on $1 billion of transactions, and then got headhunted to set up an Africa fund for a European private equity fund. And it was really through that experience, raising money as a female fund manager in Africa, that I really got the vision and the kind of purpose behind Adesuwa Capital. So I spun out of that fund and in 2019 launched Adesuwa Capital, really to address the very, very significant funding gap that I saw for women on the continent. At the time, there was less than 10 funds in the whole continent that were owned and founded by women. There was only about 2% of capital going to startups and female entrepreneurs. So for me, it was, it was very clear the reason that I wasn't making much traction, because I couldn't be what I couldn't see. So there was a very clear onus for me to really try and be the change, that I wanted to see, where I could hopefully use Adesuwa as a case study to make the business case for investing in women, so that female fund managers after me hopefully don't have the same very long fundraising experience that I had.
Amazing. Well, thank you for being here. We're going to dig much more into all of that. And Liza, you're the founder and CEO of Instant Teams, the talent marketplace that uses innovative technology, career development, and a focus on skills-based hiring to create employment solutions for companies and remote careers for military and veteran spouses. Can you share a little bit more about your background?
Sure. So I have a background in software engineering and did that for many years and ran my own software development company. And then I met my now spouse at the time, and he was in the military. And so we moved into our first military area, and every spouse I would meet would say, like, how are you working from home? How are you maintaining your career? Because they move every 2 to 3 years and sit at about 24% unemployment. And so through that experience and my technology experience, Instant Teams is actually my fourth company. So I'm very entrepreneurial. I thought I can put these things together, this talent marketplace concept that I've had for a while, and then give those jobs specifically to the military spouse community. And a lot of people think, okay, it's small niche community, but there's over 12 million active duty and veteran spouses in the ecosystem. So it's quite a large population that was really underserved. So we launched Instant Teams almost 7 years ago, getting close to our 7-year anniversary. We've raised 3 rounds of funding. We have over 500 employees located globally and growing quickly every day. So I have a definite passion to help women in their careers and their goals. And also, as a female founder who have now raised several rounds of funding, happy to contribute like that perspective into the conversation. And, it's just an honor to be sitting here with both of you today. So thank you.
Fabulous. Well, it's an honor to be in YPO with both of you incredible women. For those of you that don't know, YPO is a global leadership community of more than 32,000 chief executives in 142 countries, driven by the shared belief that the world needs better leaders. YPO members employ over 22 million people, and their companies have a combined revenue of over $9 trillion. One of the benefits of being a YPO member is the opportunity to connect with leaders like Adesuwa and Liza and have conversations like these, where we can engage in ideas and exchange and lifelong learning around business topics and create deeper relationships through virtual and global reach. So, before we get started, we'd like to remind all of you watching live that you can ask our guests questions by posting them in the comments section below, and we'll answer them as we go through and as time permits. So, now let's get on to the show. So, let's set the stage for our audience and start with some high level observations on current trends in funding for women entrepreneurs and women founded companies. According to the data from PitchBook, I think most of us have heard this data over the years. Only 2% of venture capital in the US was invested in women founded companies. In Europe, it was less than 1%. In Africa, it's slightly higher at 4%, but Adesuwa, I think that you have some data that you've seen around that as well. What do you make of these numbers? Why are the numbers so persistently low, especially when gender diversity and equality is seen as a net positive for businesses' bottom lines? Adesuwa, we'll start with you.
Yeah, sure. I think that the numbers continue to be so low because for two reasons. I think the first one is we continue to have a lack of balance and a lack of diversity when we think about who's actually writing the check. So we continue to have, a really, really significant imbalance in terms of capital allocators. I'm sure the statistics are probably similar in the US, but we published today at Rural Capital only 24 funds, 24 funds since 2008 that are female led have successfully reached a final close. So they have, check writing capacity. So I think the reason that as we continue to see that, we will continue to see, some of the statistics that you've mentioned where female entrepreneurs continue to be underfunded. In Africa, we've just also seen some data, as you said, less than 4%. Female, led startups raise 25 times less than their male counterparts. And I think that there's research that shows that if you have a female fund manager, or if you have a female investor, she's 3 times as likely to invest in a female CEO and 2 times as likely to invest in a female founder. So you have a natural trickle down effect when you have women in capital allocation roles. But on top of that, I think we also have to understand that there is still an inherent unconscious bias in the venture capital and private equity industry, because a lot of female entrepreneurs, they're not being asked the same questions that their male counterparts are being asked. And I'd love to hear Liza's perspective on this, but female entrepreneurs are typically asked prevention questions. They're deemed more risky. They're typically asked how they're mitigating risk, whereas male entrepreneurs are asked promotion questions. They're typically asked, how are you going to grow your business? How are you going to take this forward? A woman is probably asked, how are you going to, not lose customers? How are you going to not lose me money? So that line of questioning as well has been proven to also prevent women from raising capital. And I think once you change the people in the room and the people that are actually making the investment decision, we'll hopefully make some more headway.
Thank you. And Liza, you've been incredibly successful, having just raised a large round of funding from Tiger Global. And so what has been your experience on the ground in these pitch meetings, raising these dollars?
Yeah. So, obviously it's a long road to raising capital. And I think one of the keys to kind of build on what we're talking about is having access to a network. So having access to a network is extremely important when you're raising money, because warm intros are really the key into getting in front of the right investors for your vertical, for the type the round size you're doing, those kinds of things. And so when I started out, one of the things I started doing was building my network, because I didn't have like a network of other people that were connected in venture. So I was starting from basically zero. And so I had to build that over time. And I think it comes a little easier to our male counterparts, because they might already have those built-in networks and clubs where they can just come in, I know so and so, and I'll introduce you. And so I think that's one of the challenge that I've seen female founders have, is they kind of have to start from zero and work their way into a network. And that can be challenging, but it can be done, but it doesn't go quite as fast as if you already had a built-in network like that to just do warm intros immediately into. So that was one thing that I kind of focused on and lasered in on building, and it built over time. It didn't happen overnight. But the very first thing I did was go through the Founder Institute program to build a network. And then when I connected with them, I can trace my funding through those original connections, which was really interesting to me. By the time it circled around, they introed me to the very first check that I ever had into the company, who was a small micro VC who ended up giving me the warm intro to Tiger many years later. Right. And so there was a lot of things circling around that had happened in between. But I can draw that line back. And I know it was really important to build that network and make myself seen there, so that they're like, hey, don't forget about Liza over there. She's raising money, and she needs somebody to help open the door, right? Which I think is really important.
Yeah, no, those are all great points. I mean, I think finding not only those advisors, but those advocates that are really going to bust down the doors for you and make those connections is so important. I mean, we touched on this a bit, but another interesting data point is that the majority of funding for women-led startups is really at the pre-seed, the seed, and the Series A. There is a dramatic drop-off when a company is getting to scale and needs to connect with those late stage investors at Series B, C, beyond. I mean, I certainly experienced this as a founder myself with TaskRabbit. So, Liza, again, having just raised the large round from Tiger, it sounds like you got that warm intro from, a microfund early on, and the networking was really important. But can you share a little bit more about that experience and maybe help our audience understand too, just, as a company scales, as you get bigger at the later stages, like what should they be doing, as they continue to grow their businesses to meet these capital providers?
Yeah, I think the challenge comes back to that whole network situation, right? Because if your funnel is small to start with, and then you go into like how many companies actually raise these larger rounds, that number is a lot smaller. So if your funnel's already small and that number's smaller, like your challenge is that much greater, right? So one of the things that I leaned into and I learned early on was to lead with the metrics. And when you get into that later stage funding, it's not so much about like, am I betting on the founder? It's like, okay, now you have the metrics, the growth metrics, right? Do they make sense to be funded to continue to scale this organization? And what I've seen from my counterparts is they tend to focus more on the story and the problem they're solving versus up in your face metrics in the front. And so I learned that very early on, especially because I was in a niche market. And so they say like military spouse, oh, that's nice that you're helping this small group of people, right? And so I learned very early, like put the numbers in front, how big the population is, how big of a business this can become. And I think that's one of the things male founders tend to do a little bit more, like you were saying earlier about the questions you get asked. Like my question, I learned to just put all that up front so that I don't get asked those kinds of questions, right? If I say it first, then I can leap into another kind of question instead of be constantly asked, well, is your market size big enough? Are your metrics going to work? Are the KPIs there for growth? Like having that all in the very beginning of the presentation, I think does help go a long way in raising it. Still a challenge, obviously, but.
Yeah. And then you're really setting the tone for the meeting as well. I really like that. That's, I think, a really excellent tip. Adesuwa, what about you? What do you see in your portfolio as your female founders and CEOs continue to scale and continue to raise money?
Yeah, no, I think it's a very valid problem. In the African context, we have female-led funds that are pre-seed, seed, Series A. As you start to scale up, the numbers definitely start to reduce. So I think it goes back to how do we make sure that we change the imbalance of capital allocators at every stage of the funding ecosystem. And I think that we can do that by making sure that the mix of LPs as well are diverse. And we're not always going back to the same pool of investors to raise capital because
Yeah.
they'll just keep on, funding Fund 3 and Fund 4 of the same male-led fund. So I think it's also bringing diversity to the LPs. And I think for us, we were really happy. We just did the final close of our first fund late last year, and we were happy to have a good mix of local and international investors, private and institutional investors. And I think those diverse LP mixes will
Mhm.
help us see funds like Arua that, now we're doing seed and Series A. Hopefully we can scale up over time as well.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Thank you both for those perspectives. So, does business category or sector impact funding for women entrepreneurs? For instance, according to the annual New York Healthcare Innovation Report, interest in funding biotechnology businesses is on the rise, but investments in women's health startups has declined. So, are businesses focused on solutions specifically for women at a disadvantage? How can entrepreneurs sell the value proposition for these companies and convince investors of the market opportunity? Are there specific sectors where being a woman is an advantage to raising money? And can you share an example? Adesuwa, let's start with you.
Sure. So, I think Liza touched on this, but I think there is such an untapped female economy, and we're very, very vocal about it. So, yes, we're backing female-led businesses and businesses that are owned by women, but a big part of our thesis is also investing in the female economy and those goods and services that will improve women's lives. We see that as a $15 trillion market. The African population is about 1.3 billion people. Consumer spending decisions on the continent are driven by women. 80% of the consumer spending decisions are driven by women. So we're very, very bullish that actually it prevents quite an untapped opportunity, one that we think provides us with a very strong arbitrage opportunity to actually enhance returns for our investors. So yes, women's health and other sectors may seem niche to people that are not direct consumers of it. But I think as you're a woman that's writing the check and a potential consumer, it gives you that perspective to really understand the size of the market and to really invest in those untapped sectors. But I think it's a very valid statement that some of these sectors that are deemed niche because they're only addressing women's issues, but we see them as really, really great untapped market opportunities that investors haven't yet realized the potential of.
Mm-hmm. It's a great point. And Liza, what about you? What do you think?
Yeah, so I kind of see it in two lenses. Like, was it an advantage or was it a disadvantage? I'm not sure exactly, but one of the things when I raised that I heard back was founder market fit, and being a military spouse myself and then creating a company to help other military spouses, the investors saw that as a strength because I am part of the community. I was, well integrated into it. So the check marks kind of lined up. So I think for women who are solving problems for other women, it's a good founder market fit. But I do think it's a harder leap for investors, especially pitching to male investors. It takes a lot of education on what it is because you tend to understand things or you have personal experience with. And when you have to bridge that divide, it can be a challenge. So I've spent a lot of time educating investors who the military spouse community was, what kind of people they are, how diverse they are, what kind of education they have, what kind of needs they have, so that they could understand. And then once you kind of get to that level, then I think you can move past that and they say, okay, founder market fit. I understand the problem you're trying to solve. I see how big the opportunity is. I can back this. But the problem is when you're cold pitching, you don't have the opportunity to say all of those things in those first meetings. So I think that's a challenge for female founders focused on female problems and technology and like women's healthcare and things like that. It may seem like a no-brainer. Yes, this woman would know firsthand, but at the same time, sometimes they don't get in the room and the opportunity to really be able to explain it so that a male counterpart could really understand how big, women are a niche community. I mean, how many women are there in the world, right? Like that is, it's a huge population, right? And a huge problem to be solving. So again, going back to that numbers, metrics, and then leading with that first.
Yeah, I mean, what I'm hearing is it really matters who's in the room as well. And a question from the audience here, which I think is fantastic. Adesuwa, you talked about just increasing the number of check writers and having more representation in the room at the later stages. How do we do that? Do you have any strategies, any thoughts on the approach there? How can that be shifted?
So I think one way to do that is to make sure that the micro funds really, really perform. I think one way to do that is to make sure that the women that are raising funds now and their fund ones and their fund twos, we're able to really show a very, very strong track record of success stories, so that we can make the business case that yes, we can have platforms like KKR that are run by women with multiple asset classes and multiple vehicles for different stages. And so I think that's one thing that I'm very conscious of, is making sure that we're not seen as pink and washy and impact and gender, but we're actually investing and making money, and we're looking to scale this up over time. So I would say one thing is, the women-led and the female founded funds right now that are deploying capital, we have a big responsibility to really showcase the potential of female capital allocators, so that we can scale and we can be those later stage funds that fund female entrepreneurs. So that's one thing. I would say another way that we can do this as well is, I talked about it earlier, is making sure that we're diversifying our LP base, encouraging more female angel investors to invest in our funds, getting them to grow with us as we scale up, encouraging more pension funds, commercial capital to invest with us, because they can scale up with you as you grow as well as a fund manager. So I think that we should also be very intentional. I was very intentional about my LP base. It took me longer, but I'm kind of thinking long term is, how do you want to scale up as a manager? So I think we also have to be very intentional about our LP base to ensure that we can be there for female entrepreneurs when they're Series C and Series D. So that's something that I think about.
I love that. I mean, I think particularly in this market where it's going to be a building market, it's a great time to deploy into the market at the bottom and build up. We do want to see, these funds scale and have more representation at the later stages. So it's a good time to build. This year's theme for International Women's Day is Embrace Equity, which is different from equality. While equality means providing everyone with the same resources and opportunities, equity means acknowledging the differences and making adjustments to the imbalances. Why should CEOs make equity a top priority in their organizations? And how can you inspire people within your own organizations and professional networks to embrace equity? Liza, let's start with you for this one.
Sure. Equity is obviously very important to us at Instant Teams. We have 500 employees, 91% are female, 83% of our leadership is women in the organization and the company. So I think, being a female-led company, we just kind of naturally look to those kind of equitable positions where we can promote from within and we can help mentor and bring other women into certain positions. I think one of the things that companies should look for too, everyone tends to think of like the younger, like a mentoring younger women that come in the organization so that they can build up. But women of all ages need this kind of help within the organization. So I think it's important to know, you have women that re-enter the workforce that have maybe been out of the workforce for a while. You have women that are looking to step up into C-suite roles, women that are looking to break into the workforce after being out for a while. So it comes in all forms, but all of those things are profitable and good for the business, right? It's not just a good thing to do. It really does drive the bottom line. And, the females that work at my company are extremely dedicated and hardworking and bring all kinds of thoughts and ideas and things to the table. So the more diverse thought that you can get, at the table, the stronger your company is, the stronger your bottom line is. So it's a business decision, but it's also, the right thing to do, and something that it goes kind of within that network building stage. Like you're building that within your own company so that women have access to, upskill and be able to step up into new roles. And you can make sure that it's not only just fair across the board, but that you're elevating it within your own organization, and it's good for everyone.
Liza, are you doing anything specifically around the equity piece? Are there adjustments that you make? How do you think about, promoting these female leaders from within?
Yeah. So, I mean, we always try, if there's a way to not hire outside in from a leadership position, if there's a way for us to work, mentor, and promote up. Sometimes there's not, right? And at the stage of growth in the company we're in, sometimes we do have to layer in outside individuals. But we do make sure that we post all of our job opportunities internally first to get interest before we go out externally to advertise like the new positions that we're opening up. Because you never know either who in your organization has experience maybe in that field, but they're over here in a different department. And if they had known or had access to it before you opened it up, they might have been able to make the switch and progress a little bit faster in their career. So we do that intentionally at our organization.
That's great. And Adesuwa, how do you think about the companies in your portfolio and helping them promote more equity as well?
Yeah, so for us, we're very intentional about making sure that there's equity in our company Arua, but there's also equity in the investments that we do. We think it actually enhances the profitability of the company. We think that as you're able to bring diversity of thought, as you're able to bring diversity to boards and diversity to workforces, diversity to value chains, but not just diversity, but also economic empowerment within those structures. We think that it's actually beneficial to the company's bottom line in terms of profitability, and as a reason for that, it then enhances the returns of our fund. So we spend a lot of time with our portfolio companies in due diligence to make sure that, if there isn't the level of equity that we would expect, we're designing plans to get to that during our investment period. So whether it's, implementing, ESOPs for women in management that have not been, provided with ownership, whether that's, making sure there are sales incentive schemes or things of the sort. So I'm very big on power rather than empowerment, and I think that you can do that through equity in our companies in a big way.
I love that. And what a gift you're giving to your portfolio companies by being able to coach them through that. I mean, not many investors have that skill set. So I think that's a tremendous value add that you're offering. So if you both think of your own leadership journeys, how has your industry changed in terms of gender equality and equity? What's the different what's been different, what's the same since you started your careers, and what progress still needs to be made? Adesuwa, I'll go to you first.
So I think that we have made some progress. So if I think about kind of the private equity and venture capital landscape in Africa, and I think of, the amount of female funds that are getting raised, and the amount of, women that are allocating capital. When I started Arua, it was less than 10 of us. Now there's about 20, 24, 25 of us, depending on. There is some progress, definitely not as fast as I would like to see it. Um, and also on the female entrepreneur side, it went from 2% to 4% in terms of female-led startups raising funding. So there is progress, but we still have a very long way to go. And I'm hoping that as we're able to have more success stories, as we're able to have more success stories like Liza and others, then it would encourage institutional investors to back female fund managers, to back gender lens funds, because I really think that there is a very huge untapped opportunity, and I always say that investing in women is the last asset class that's unrealized in private equity and venture capital. So I'm very, very excited to, even though there hasn't been that much progress, I'm very excited that we're playing our part to hopefully change that going forward.
That's great. And Liza, can you share your thoughts as well?
Sure. So, I started my career in tech, so there's not a ton of women in tech. Actually, my very first job that I got was at a startup, and I was the only woman that worked there in the entire company. So I'm hopeful that that has changed, that there are more women coming into tech and building those kinds of companies. I was also a little hopeful that with COVID, the ability to raise funds remotely would help women-led companies, because personally, I raised money pre-COVID completely via Zoom, and now it's a pretty common factor. But a lot of investors told me early on, you're going to have a really hard time. You need to go on a roadshow, a 4-month roadshow. And I have 4 children. So a 4-month roadshow just is not a practical thing for me to be able to do as a female founder. So I needed a way to do it where I didn't have to be gone for 4 solid months, right? And I think now that with technology and kind of the acceptance of doing these things, you don't have to be in person for everything, will help even the playing field. That's my hope. The data hasn't shown that just yet. But I think that the way we raise money and the expectations of that, if we can help to shift that mindset, we can open up more opportunities for more women to be able to achieve those things.
Yeah, I think it's a great point and really interesting experience that you shared, having raised your money pre-COVID over Zoom, right? And now that's kind of the norm. I think, as an investor myself, I love doing the first meetings over Zoom. I think it's so much more efficient. And so hopefully it does open up the pool of capital and cast a wider net on the types of entrepreneurs that can get in front of investors and take these meetings. So I think that's exciting. The other thing for me, having founded TaskRabbit and then moved over to the investing side is, I think we're just having more of these conversations. I'm not sure these conversations happened 10, 15 years ago in the same way, in the same transparent way. I think they would happen behind closed doors, or, they'd be like a female founder networking event and we'd all kind of commiserate together on, raising money. But I think now the conversations are happening in a more bold and transparent way. And I think that's just so important for the industry, because the industry needs to hear these voices and these stories and these experiences in order to, make the changes. So well, thank you both for sharing your expertise with your audience today. Before we go, and I'd encourage the audience to add some more questions in that we can ask, I'd like to ask each of you one last question. As a member of YPO, what benefits have you and your family enjoyed by belonging to this community? And what do you think founders, entrepreneurs, and business leaders can gain by belonging to this type of organization? Adesuwa, can you share your thoughts on this?
Yeah, sure. I hope you can hear me. My internet's acting up a little bit. But for me, I think YPO has been great for me and my family. It's kind of we've been able to make some really deep connections that we probably wouldn't have been able to make without IPOs through Forum. I've really enjoyed Forum and being able to talk to my forum group. I'm a sole GP, so having that community to bounce ideas off with regards to my business or with regards to challenges in family or personally has been really, really helpful. I definitely enjoy our monthly forum meetings. And just increasing the network. Where I'm part of the YPO Lagos chapter, and I've managed to meet so many people that I probably wouldn't have met if not for YPO. So I've really enjoyed, the deep, meaningful, conversations that I've been able to have with my forum, but also just the networking opportunities and the learning that I've been able to be exposed to over the last year since I've been a member. And I'm now going to be going to the GLC where I'm going to be an assistant learning officer. So very excited about that too. So yeah, I've had a really great experience and would encourage business leaders and CEOs to join.
That's fabulous. Well, I'll see you at the GLC. And Liza, what about you? Can you share your YPO experience with the audience?
Sure. Well, I'm still relatively new to YPO, so this is the first year that I've been in the organization. And I was really looking forward to being able to build the network of other CEOs and have that people that you can reach out to bounce your ideas around. And I think it is important, like as the next stage of business that you grow in, to be able to have peers that you can talk to that have been through it. Maybe they're a little bit further in front of you, or a little bit behind, to where you can share. So I'm about to have my first forum experience. We're kicking it off officially in April, so it took me a little bit to navigate to a forum. So I'm excited about digging into that side of YPO. But I think it does help further. There's not as many women in YPO, so having something like this to where we can highlight women on International Women's Day is amazing of them to do, and to be able to have the male counterparts really be advocates for us within the network and say, hey, have you met Liza? She is a new YPO member, and I have seen and experienced that here, which has been fabulous.
I love that. I love that. Well, I've been in YPO since 2014. I'm part of the Golden Gate chapter. And I can tell you in the audience that YPO has been a huge impact on my life, both from a business standpoint, everything from, hiring and firing and selling and, raising, and then ultimately the acquisition we did to IKEA, but also, personal as well and family. It's just so highly impactful. And I'm really, really passionate about the membership of the organization. And I think that it's just so exciting to be able to be here with you both today and meet more members around the globe as well. We do have a couple questions from the audience here. Liza, I'm going to go to you first on this one. What is your biggest piece of advice that you could give a female founder trying to scale?
Ooh, biggest piece of advice. I think just focusing in on what the goal is of the scale and not being afraid to go after whatever it takes to get you to that point, and not hesitating. I think a lot of times we question our decisions or question, should we do this? Should we do that? But when you know it's the right decision, like staying with it, sticking with it, and being bold about it and stating what you're trying to do, and then following through with that would probably be what I see people tend to struggle with the most in this stage of scale. Is like making the plan, sticking with the plan, knowing that you know what the plan is, and communicating that across the board, and not questioning yourself during the process, because it's very easy to be like, oh, was that the right decision? Maybe I should have done this. Like, keep moving forward, keep pushing the vision, and just know it's going to be tough. Like, it's not easy. I'm sure, Leah, like you have been through this. You're ahead of me, have seen the other side of it, right? It's not easy. It's really hard, and it can be kind of lonely, which is why YPO is a nice network as well, to talk to other people that have been through it. So just keep pushing through. Know that it's going to be hard. You're not going to do everything perfectly, but you have the plan, and keep executing against the plan.
Yep, that makes a lot of sense. And I think going back to your point, Liza, on being a purpose-built founder, I mean, that's really what you can tell. That's what drives your passion. And it's so difficult, but that purpose and vision is really what's going to help you push through.
Mm-hmm.
And I think Adesuwa was having a bit of trouble with Wi-Fi, so I won't I won't put her on the spot at this moment, but I do want to thank you both and everyone who tuned in for being a part of this conversation. If you enjoyed this episode as much as I did, please let us know by sharing it with your friends, followers, connections. And don't forget to follow us on Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, or YouTube so you can be one of the first people to learn about our next episode coming up. I'm Leah Solivan, and this was YPO Presents Ask the Experts. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you all.